Be careful to guard against all greed, Jesus says to the people. What does greed see? When we're greedy and we're looking, what are we looking at? In the case of these two brothers, I suppose it was the younger one who wanted Jesus to tell his brother to share. He said, "Tell my brother to share some of the inheritance with me," right? What is he looking at? What's the younger brother looking at? He's looking at all the stuff. That's what he's looking at. The money, the inheritance, probably the family land, whatever it is. So if he's looking at all of that, what is he not seeing? His brother. He sees the stuff and he misses the person. And that's what greed sees, whether it's him or any of us. When we get greedy, when we want something, we don't know what we're looking at. We look at stuff, we look at reputation, we look at what somebody has, their good looks, their possessions, their popularity, their academic skills, whatever it is. And we fail to actually see the person. We just see the characteristics of the person that we're a little bit jealous about. And that's not the whole person. So this young man, who knows, maybe both brothers, maybe the older brother is deliberately keeping it from him. They're both impoverished because when their eyes are on the stuff, they're not on the person. So Jesus tells them this story about this successful man. He's wealthy, he's blessed by God, he's got great harvests, right? All that is God. I mean, he's out there working, but every farmer knows you got to depend upon the Lord or you don't bring in a harvest, right? So he's blessed by God with all these things, and he's looking at himself and saying, what shall I do with all this? And then he builds bigger barns. Now, probably the barns that he tears down are the ones that he built a few years ago because his previous barns weren't big enough, right? So he builds these barns, he gets this pattern going, and he's ready to be content with himself. Now, in the story about this man, we hear about him, we hear about his hard work, we hear about how God blessed him, we hear about his plans for keeping his prosperity and for enjoying it. What do we not hear? What is woefully absent from this story? Another human being, or if you will, the man's family. It's not in there. Maybe he has family, but the way Jesus tells the story helps to bring forth the point that the family's not on his mind. It's not what he's thinking about. It's not what he's planning. It's not how he understands himself. And so the man thinks of himself in relationship to his possessions, but not in relationship to a person. And so he's impoverished. He's impoverished because of this greed, not for greed of other people's things, but the greed to hang on to what he has. He misses whatever opportunity there is to give thanks to God and to see other people for who they are. And so there is a sadness here. Now, when God, Jesus tells the story, he says, God says to the man, tonight, right, you fool, tonight your life will be demanded of you. This is not God's revenge. This is not God being angry at him. This is not God focusing on his stuff. God is focusing, if you read carefully, on the man. And the man is not focusing either on God or anyone else. And so God sees the man, but the man does not see God. And therefore, he doesn't even really rightly see himself. When Jesus tells the story, and he tells the story, he focuses as well on the man and not on the man's stuff. So when we look at this story, we might have this interpretation as, well, all that stuff is bad, or he shouldn't want all that stuff. we would be focusing on the stuff. And in the story, God and Jesus focus on the man. The sadness is that the man focuses on the stuff. Let's not bring that sadness upon ourselves by making the same mistake. In the first reading from Ecclesiastes, Qoheleth is probably Solomon. He speaks of vanity. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity. So how do you translate this word that we call vanity here? And really it has to do with this. It's like a fog or a smoke, just like a passing smoke that goes in and then fades away. It comes and it goes, it moves with the wind, it disappears. The better image that I heard from Bishop Robert Barron was he said it's like one of those soap bubbles, right? And it floats up, you're like, oh, cool, look at the way the light's shining off it, and poof, it's gone. That's what the word is here, vanity. It's not real, it just disappears. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity. And again, Solomon, as wise as he is, he tells this with some sadness. He's sad. And why is he sad? Because he says, me and others, we work hard in our life. We acquire wisdom. That's not easy to acquire. That's good stuff, wisdom, right? Industry, he's got all these things, and he says, and now I have to leave it to somebody who didn't work for it, who doesn't understand, the value of it, right? And so Solomon's sadness is that he has to leave it to somebody who he doesn't think appreciates it as well as it needs to be appreciated. Solomon as well is focused here, or at least his story about the common man is focused on the stuff. What is to be handed on? What is to be unworthily received? And then he focuses a little bit on who receives it, but it's an occasion of sadness for him. Might be that the people he's handing it on to are deficient in some way or another. But which of us is not deficient? I'm deficient, right? I mean, we all have faults, and if we focus on our faults, who can survive? Who could survive? So the point isn't to ignore faults, but to be honest. We have to be honest about who we are, what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, and then who we are before the Lord. And so this story is told, first of all, so that let me check my notes here. Got to make sure I'm following my own train of thought. Aha. So St. Paul says, in the second reading, set your mind not on the things of earth, but on the things of heaven. Does that mean the things of earth are bad? No, that's right. They're good. They're good. The things of earth are good. They're not of ultimate good. They're not of eternal good, but they are earthly goods. And when God created Adam and Eve, when he created the human family, he gave us authority and responsibility over the things of the world and responsibility to take care of them. What? Because they're for our benefit. The world is created to be lived in, the Psalms tell us, by us. And so we see the things of the world, we appreciate their goodness, but St. Paul reminds us they're not what satisfies you. So don't set your heart on those things. Instead, set your heart on the things of heaven. So are we to ignore all the things here? No, not that either. What are the world's goods for? God gave them, he created them. As C.S. Lewis says, God likes stuff, he invented it. Right? He created it. So what are the world's goods for? Well, they're for a greater good. They're not for their own sake. What are we for? You remember your Baltimore Catechism? Right? Why are we here? Right? To love and to know God in this life and in the next. And so we are to know and love God in this life and in the next. We are for communion with God. That's our identity. That's what we're created for. And it's for our own sake, because to know and to love God is to be alive and is to be free and is to be fulfilled. And so all of the things in the world are given to us for that purpose. And so everything, all the goods of the world are given to us for the purpose of communion with God. Do the things that we have, are the things under our charge, the things that we're responsible for, that we sometimes worry too much about, are they helping us in our communion with God, or are they keeping us from Him? And when it comes to the world's goods, are we using the goods under our care to help other people in their relationship to God and their communion with God? And are we using the world's goods in order to increase our communion with one another? Because to know and to love God doesn't mean that we get to go up and be with God all by ourselves. No. Heaven is going to be very crowded. And we better get used to it. Because to know and to love God is to know and to love God together with, shoulder to shoulder with, bumping into every other person that knows and loves God and is loved by Him. So, all the world's goods are made for communion. Now, I have a friend, let me use this illustration. I have a friend, Father Steve Kunkel. Some of you might know him. Know him from seminary. He's pastor at St. Thomas the Apostle. He's got a lot of hobbies, but one of his hobbies is cameras. He likes cameras, he likes taking pictures, he's really good at it. Matter of fact, several years ago we came by and picked up Father Charlie, because Father Charlie likes photography too. We came out with him, we went down to the Air Museum, or the Boneyard, right? All the airplanes down there, and the Air Museum down in Tucson, and then we went to Saguaro National Monument. They have all these different lenses. They were telling me about them, and these cameras, and they're taking pictures, and I'm carrying some of the equipment, and they're taking pictures, and Father Steve's really good at this. He kind of brings it, as he takes a picture, he's telling me what he's looking for, and what the shot looks like, and why he wants this shot instead of that one, and what about the light and all this stuff. And then he says, here, and he says, now you point the camera, now take that, what do you see in the lens? And he's bringing me in to what he's doing. And guys, we need stuff to help us talk to each other. That's what golf is for, right? It's not about getting a ball in a hole. It's about guys going out and have something to talk about when the conversation dies down. That's what golf is for. So that's what pretty much all guys' hobbies are for, is to help us to talk to each other. And so we're talking about cameras and about picture taking, and we're also telling jokes and enjoying our friendship and telling stories from ministry and the years that we've known each other, and just enjoying friendship and communion. That's good. He's very good at doing that. And so I started to get good by the end of the day. I'm like, hey, take a picture over here. Look at that shot. He says, oh, yeah, it's a nice one. So he takes a picture, and then I start showing him other things. I'm carrying his bag around for him, no problem. I'll carry the lens, happy to do it. And he says, Chauncey, you should get a camera. I'm like, no, Steve, that would be a disaster. Because I said, you have a camera and you have fun with it and you can bring me in and showing what you're doing. If I have a camera, I'll be fiddling with it and wonder why this doesn't work and how this was supposed to go, and I'll ignore you all day long. So he says, you and I are different personalities, and you can have a camera and bring people in. I'm here to help you because I don't want a camera. It'll ruin my day, right? But I'm enjoying my day with you while you take pictures and to enjoy and to learn how that's done. So, are the things that we have, are they bringing us closer? Do we just say, well, I should do this, I should have this, somebody else wants me to have this, but is it bringing you closer to God and to other people? Or is it a stumbling block for you? Be honest with yourself. Acknowledge where your weaknesses are, and don't just wish you were the person hope you're the person you wish you were, right? Acknowledge and accept the person you are and see, are these things helping me in communion or not, with God and with others? I'll tell a story about my dad, mostly because it's funny, but now you can know a little bit about where I get this from. So growing up, my parents both had Subarus, stick shift. And my dad's was a 1983 Subaru station wagon, almost a hatchback now. It was a tiny little thing. No power at all, no guts at all in that engine, but had a stick shift, so I learned to drive on that. So it was a lot easier to learn how to drive on that car, because there was no power. But As he used the car, the clutch began to wear out. That's what happened a lot with those cars. And as the clutch wears out, he went to go look at what it would cost, and he thought, well, that's too much money. He didn't want to put that much money in that car. So he drove it without a clutch. You ever done that? It doesn't mean you're frying the engine or anything like that. I'll tell you how it's done. It's really easy. When you have your car and you stop it, you put it in first gear. Then you turn the key, and the starter starts the engine, and it's already connected to the transmission. So you're going, and you start going until you're in first gear, right? So the starter gets you moving until the engine can take over in first gear. And then when you get up to about 3,000 RPM or so, you just gently slide that shifter down towards second gear, and as soon as the engine and the transmission match up, it just slides right in. Second gear, and then you just give it some more gas and get it on up, higher RPMs, and then you let off the gas and you bring it up to third gear and gently slide it in, right? And so he drove the car this way. And then when you come to a stoplight, right, he takes it out of gear, glides to the stoplight, and before the car stops, he puts it in first gear and turns the engine off. And then the light turns green and it starts all over again, right? So when my dad took the car, and he taught me how to drive it, because once in a while, coming back from college, I would need to borrow his car if I needed to run errands or do whatever during the day. And so I'd take him to work, or he'd drive to work, one or the other, and then he'd say, okay, here's the car, or sometimes I'd go pick up the car at where he worked, and then just come back and pick him up in the evening. So I had to learn how to drive that car, no problem. But I'll tell you what my dad never worried about. He never worried about somebody stealing his car. He had no worries there. Why? Wasn't concerned. He didn't want to bother with it, and that was worth a lot to him. He was happy about that he could park his car in the parking lot, leave the windows down, leave the key in there, and he said, look, if somebody takes my car, they need it more than I do. And he was happy. So what kind of relationship do you have with things? Do we cling to things? Do we want things? Do we hold on? We want things to give us joy? Or do we say, no, my joy is found in something else, in somewhere else? Jesus says, be on your guard against greed. So there's antidotes to greed. There's a lot of them, but we'll go over two. One is gratitude. That's an antidote to just about anything. Gratitude. So gratitude is to be grateful. So in my focus, when I'm being grateful, my focus is on the thing I'm grateful for? No. Where is my focus? On the giver of the gift. So when I'm being grateful, I'm not focused on the stuff. It's not about the stuff. It's about the person. And so gratitude lifts us up to be grateful to God, to be grateful to the people who give. And then it puts the thing in perspective. And then also, after gratitude then, is generosity. And generosity is this, that when the gift is given, and when I acknowledge that with gratitude, that gift, that thing given to me, might be exchanged for something more valuable. Not at the store necessarily, but this. Why does God give you so many things? Why does he give you so many blessings? Because there's something you can't manufacture. You can't manufacture anything to give away. You have to receive it from God, together with your help many times, but you receive it from God, and then when you give it away, you get this gift. You get to imitate God in his generosity. God is generous. How do we be generous? We could be generous in imitation of God, but the only way we can do that is to be generous like God with the things that God gives to us. And those aren't just material things. Those are also our time, our attention, right? I'll tell another story. Father Frank Peacock, of happy memory, I lived with him at the cathedral for a couple of years. And so Father Frank Peacock was an older priest. He was at Our Lady of Fatima. He didn't have the rectory there because the missionaries of charity moved into the rectory, if you remember. And so he moved out, lived at the cathedral, and I saw him there. And Father Frank Peacock was a simple man and loved people, and so he had these old shoes, right? They were kind of worn out on the bottom. And so Bishop Olmsted told this story at his funeral a few years ago. He said, he saw Father Frank's old shoes, and so he said, I'll get Father Frank some new shoes. So he went and got Father Frank some new black tennis shoes, just like he had on the other pair, and he brought them and gave them to Father Frank. Well, Father Frank is like he won the lottery. Oh, wow! He was so happy. He was so grateful. And he just kept talking about it and talking about it. He got these great shoes from Bishop Olmsted. Oh, look at these. They're so comfortable, right? I mean, he had old feet. He was happy to have comfortable shoes. He was so grateful. And you'd see him with the new shoes, and within a week, he had his old shoes on again. So Bishop Olmsted asked him, Frank, what happened to your shoes? He says, he said, this guy came to the rectory door needing some help. He didn't have any shoes, so I gave him my shoes. And that was Father Frank Peacock. He did that repeatedly, right? But the thing is he was grateful. He wasn't ungrateful for those shoes. He was over the top grateful. And he was unattached. He had that good relationship with those things. So, it's not about the stuff. It's about the people. Because Father Frank, Bishop Olmsted made a connection with him, and he made a connection with the man at the door. It's not about the stuff. So when we hear the story about this and about riches and don't be greedy, it's not about the stuff. It's about the people. It's about communion with God and with one another. Practical example to take home. We have things with which we can be generous, right? We have generosity. We can be generous with our time, our money, our presence, our space, like our personal space, right? Our words, so much more. So I pull this little bit from a rabbi who I think has good family advice, Rabbi Manis Friedman. And he says this. He says this, if we're going to live in family life, we have to be generous. This is generosity in the home. He says, be generous with your time. Be generous with your space. Don't be like, I need all my own space, you guys stay away. No. We might feel that way, but we need to somehow learn to be generous with our space. We need to learn to be generous with our money, to provide rather than to keep, right? To trust, with our presence and with our words, how we treat each other. And so he says this, we can sometimes be generous with one thing but not another. We might be very generous with our money toward our family, but not our time. But both are necessary. We might be generous with our time, but not our space. Hey, I'm with you, that's great. Okay, now I'm on my own time, leave me alone. We might be generous in how we think. You might think the world of your spouse or your children. And when you do, be generous with your words. Tell them. Tell them. Is there more to this gospel than just seeing the person? Yes, there is. There's a lot more. The gospel call to simplicity is very important. A simple life. Very important. But that's another lesson. There's also the lesson of recognizing the effect that lots of stuff or the world's riches or prestige or whatever has on us and how we change and how it can pull us away from God while thinking that we're just fine, even holy and virtuous. That's a real important lesson. We need to acknowledge that, but that's a different lesson. So tonight, I just wanted to focus on this one, because this lesson tonight, that all the goods of creation, through gratitude and generosity, must lead us to communion with God and neighbor. Even though it's not the only lesson, I think it's the core lesson that will help us understand the other lessons about gospel poverty. On the altar, Jesus calls us and we come. What do we come for? God gives us blessings. God gives us joy. God gives us many things in our life that we desire, that we want. But what's the most important thing that God gives us in the Mass, at the altar? Himself. Yeah, not his stuff, not even his blessings. The most important thing we come for is God himself. And what does he want from us? All our stuff? Does he want more of your time? Does he want more of your attention? What does he want? He wants you. And so the Lord gives himself to us, and he calls us to give ourselves to him, and we learn how to do that. It's not about the stuff.